Greetings, Brother Tomasio here, Catholics for Trump, and I thank one of our members who posted this video of Michael Matt, who is the head of the Remnant Ministry, newspaper, internet, very traditional Catholic person who I don't know personally, but he has just released a video in which he is taking on Pope Francis and accusing him of basically destroying the Catholic faith. So I'm here to debate Michael Matt on what's going on, okay? And I want everybody from Catholics for Trump and everybody, the Remnant people, Latin Mass people, traditional, charismatic, Protestants, you know, to check it out, okay? Now, I'm going to play enough of Michael and then I'll comment, okay? Here we go.
Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt, still hiding out down here in the catacombs. The Vatican is in the news this week and things are going from bad to worse. The Vatican, I think it can fairly be said, is no longer, obviously at least, under the charge of those who are practicing Catholics. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I do believe we've come very close to that point. I'm not sure what they are, but their Catholicity grows more suspect by the day.
Images of clouds, lions, and butterflies alternating with polluted air and parched farmland were projected on the famous facade of St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican on Tuesday night as global leaders try to thrash out a historic climate deal in Paris.
And I don't know how else to describe what they're doing with our church, other than they're taking it to a place that is no longer Catholic. Now, thank God, we're not the only ones. For 50 years, we've been kind of alone, not we as in the remnant, but traditionalists have been more or less alone, trying to point out that something has gone terribly wrong in the church. Well, that, at least, Francis has ended those days. Now we're not it's not just the rad trads who are pointing this out. We're not the only ones at a loss for how to deal with this pontificate of Pope Francis. Now we have 4 cardinals, thanks be to God. Really 5 if you consider Cardinal Pell, who seems to be throwing in behind the 4 cardinals. And these men are opposing Pope Francis's attempt to let public adulterers receive Holy Communion. I hate to even say that again, because we're all getting used to hearing it. The Pope wants to let public adulterers receive Holy Communion. You can't really even believe, you got to slow down and think about that. That this is what the issue is right now. This is what we're all wrestling with. Thank God for those cardinals, and also now the cardinals, because they are in leadership positions in the church, I think they're encouraging a lot of less powerful churchmen to step forward. So we've got several bishops now weighing in support of Cardinal Burke and the other 3 cardinals. Francis must be stopped is the message. The great Bishop Athanasius Schneider, for example, publicized his defense for Cardinal Burke and company this week, saying, quote, "The 4 cardinals, with their prophetic voice demanding doctrinal and pastoral clarity, have a great merit before their own conscience, before history, and before innumerable simple, faithful Catholics of our day, who are driven to the ecclesiastical periphery because of their fidelity to Christ's teaching about the indissolubility of marriage," end quote. Now, of course, the Vatican, which never ceases to extol the merits of
Okay, so let's take the first part here. Okay, so the Vatican is not being run by Catholics anymore, okay? And that these traditional Catholics have been a prophetic voice for the last 50 years since Vatican II, saying something's wrong, something's wrong. And now you have 4 cardinals and possibly a 5th who are saying that we're going to call Pope Francis out on the carpet here. Pope Francis must be stopped because he's allowing public adulterers to receive Holy Communion. Okay, so let's just take a look at that. Okay, so non-Catholics or whatever are running the Vatican. Okay, so so what? I mean, we know that the devil has been trying to take over the church, and we know that the devil has people under his control who are high up high-ranking bishops, cardinals, priests. We know that. Malachi Martin exposed that. And we had Judas that snuck into Jesus's group. Okay, so the devil is inside the church, right? We've heard that. The smoke of Satan is inside the church. Malachi Martin, you know, he put this out there in Windswept House. Okay, the devil's in the church. Okay, why wouldn't he be in the church? Okay, he would want to be in the church. He would want to take over the church. He would want to destroy the church. We know that. He's not telling us anything we don't know. Okay, but does that mean that the devil has taken over the church? Okay, he's saying the devil's taken over the church. The devil's in control of the church. Really? The devil's in control of the church? Are you serious? You're telling me the devil's in control of the church? Jesus said the gates of hell will not prevail against thee. Okay? But he's saying the gates of hell have prevailed against thee. That the devil has taken control of the church. All right, there's a contradiction to Scripture. I don't believe the devil has taken over the church. I do believe the devil is in the church, and I do believe the devil is trying to mess up the church. But I don't believe he's taken over the church. The church belongs to Jesus and Mary. Okay? And trust me, Jesus and Mary are still in the church. I promise you that. Okay, what else did they say? Public adulterers. The Pope's not saying public adulterers can receive communion. I promise you, you cannot find that anywhere where the Pope says public adulterers can receive communion. No, he's not saying that. He is saying that under pastoral consideration, if a person is in a situation in which they are seeking Jesus Christ in their life, they want the Lord, they need the grace that comes from the sacraments. We're talking about a believer here. We're not talking about a pro-abortion politician receiving communion. Hello, why aren't you talking about that? Okay, we're talking about a woman maybe in a second marriage that the first one hasn't been annulled, or the husband is refusing an annulment, or she's got 4 kids and she can't tell the husband that she's not going to have sex with him anymore because he's going to end up leaving her and the 4 kids. You understand? We're talking about circumstances that are very, very difficult. And someone who's in a ridiculous situation who wants to receive the sacrament, if pastorally the pastor thinks and believes that this situation requires a conscience call here, it's not a normal situation. So Francis isn't saying under normal situations adulterers receive communion. No, he's saying under unusual circumstances I will give pastors permission to make that call. Okay, so the exaggeration is ridiculous here. Okay, let's keep going.
Dialogue and tolerance with Hottentots and who knows what else all around the world who aren't Catholic or Christian or anything else. This Vatican wants nothing to do with dialogue now when it comes to the 4 cardinals. They want nothing to do with dialoguing with this growing group of faithful churchmen whose Catholic consciences, well-formed consciences, prohibit them from just sitting back and saying, well, we'll just see what happens. So the Vatican this week thunders silence through the Dean of the Roman Rota, Archbishop Pio Vito Pinto, the top canonical court overseeing marriage, warning Cardinal Burke from the Vatican this week for causing, according to this Archbishop, for causing grave scandal. Grave scandal. Now we're talking about allowing public adulterers to receive Holy Communion without repentance. That's not scandalous. But for a cardinal to ask questions about changing the Church's rule on this, that, according to this modern Vatican, is going to give grave scandal. Because the faithful cardinal dared to raise his voice with questions. And remember this, questions. He's raising questions. He's not making accusations, Cardinal Burke. Raising questions that Francis refuses to answer. What about dialogue? What about the Church of Accompaniment? Why isn't the modern Vatican, why aren't they worrying about accompanying faithful princes of the Church who have questions about the way things are going right now? So, Cardinal Burke and company, welcome to the Archbishop Lefebvre Club of Faithful Princes of the Church, who in conscience couldn't just sit back and say nothing against the destruction of the Church at the hands of modernists in Rome. This has been going on for a long time. Again, Pope Francis is the ultimate Pope of Vatican II, although I don't think he gives a rip about Vatican II anymore. It's too conservative for him. He is on the logical continuum of Vatican II. He's just tearing everything down. I don't expect Archbishop Pio Vito to be a Thomas, of course, being a modern, churchman. But what he says lies right in the face of St. Thomas Aquinas, who writes, of course, quote, "There being an imminent danger for the faith, prelates must be questioned, even publicly, by their subjects. And prelates, indeed, an example of humility, that they not disdain corrections from those who are lower and subject to them. Subjects have an example of zeal and freedom, that they fear not to correct their prelates, particularly if their crime is public and verges on danger to the multitude." Now, when you think about this, in light of what the Church teaches about resisting an authority who has gone astray, and Pope Francis ignoring these men, refusing to answer their questions, in all due respect to the office and to Francis himself, doesn't this refusal to dialogue with the four cardinals suggest an arrogance impossible to reconcile with Pope Francis the Humble that we see on the television? It's not just traditionalists speaking out anymore on these things. Cardinals, bishops, and scores of priests are asking questions, and the Holy Father is ignoring them. He's refusing. He's just pushing ahead, forgetting all about the scandal that's coming about because of how he's doing this. After a papal airplane interview with the press, in which Pope Francis said that proselytism among Christians in itself is a grave sin, Father Brian Harrison, certainly again, no rad trad, has had enough. And in the Remnant over at remnantnewspaper.com, he wrote a letter that says the following, quote, "It would be hard to conceive..."
All right, time out. We'll get back to that. We will get back to that, okay? We're going to get back to that. But let's deal with this other thing he's saying. Pope Francis is arrogant, right? He keeps pressing on with this. He's not listening. He's not dialoguing. He did respond. He says, not everything's black and white. That was his response. I heard him say it. He's saying, not everything is black and white, guys. Okay, so Cardinal Burke, these guys, right? All they need to do, very simple, is preach the New Testament. Jesus said, here, if you divorce and marry another, you're committing adultery. Right? Read from the gospel. If someone comes to you and they're in public adultery and they say, can I receive communion? You just say, no, you can't receive communion. Okay? Now, if there's another bishop somewhere else that sees it differently, the Pope is putting it on that bishop or that priest or that pastor, okay, to make that judgment call. Because the Pope's saying not everything is black and white. It's not black and white. Not everything is black and white, guys. It's not. There's no question about it. Our Catholic faith tells us you have grave matter, but then you have something called culpability. And the culpability is lessened based on circumstances. So if you have someone with a gun to their head, okay, maybe symbolically a gun to their head, and they go along with something because they don't want to get shot, guess what? They're not morally culpable. Do you understand? That's what the Pope is saying. And there are tons of situations out there where there is trafficking going on, there's abuse going on, and you might say, oh, well then, just leave your husband. Well, you got 4 kids, or you got a death threat, or you think this is unusual? It's not unusual. It's clearly not. There are some crazy people out there in this world who keep people hostage. Ideally speaking, yeah, everybody's married the first time and everybody gets along. And there's no divorce. But guess what? That is not real, guys. There's 50% of marriages end in divorce. And many Catholic. We're talking Catholic, okay? The church should have never got involved in the annulment process. That, you can make it optional if somebody really needs someone to tell them whether or not their marriage is valid or not, you know what I'm saying, then have that option. But to make it mandatory